Hey everyone, I'm going to be talking about the Survey UI Tweaks external module today. And what this module allows you to do is it gives you the ability to make certain tweaks to either, you can do it either globally to all your surveys in a project or individually on a one-by-one basis. Um, so I'm going to run through the ones that are applicable for all surveys. The first thing you can do is remove what they call the XSTD, which is a table data row. Whenever you have a survey that has the numbered questions, REDCap pushes the survey over by about an inch to the right so it has room for the question numbering. And what this tweak does is it allows you to take that extra space off if you don't have numbered questions. So it gives you a little more breathing room on your survey. The next one is to set up the auto scroll, and what this allows you to do is if the user selects a radio button or fills out a drop-down question, the survey will automatically scroll up to the top of the page after that. So it automatically scrolls the survey upward, which is helpful if you're doing this, filling out a survey on a tablet or a mobile device. And then I don't know how many of you were familiar with the survey queue option with surveys, but there's a little survey queue icon in the upper right corner, and there's a tweak that allows you to hide that. There's also a tweak that allows you to hide the queue at the end of the survey. So whenever you have the survey queue enabled, after the users have completed the surveys, if they have to do multiple surveys, it'll show a list of the surveys as a table at the end of the survey after everything's been submitted. So you can have the survey queue enabled and you can hide the summary table at the end if you want. The next thing is you can hide the font resize option that's up in the right-hand corner if you don't need that. You can also hide any of the reset links for drop downs and radio buttons. And then for individual surveys, you can hide the submit button. So if you have a survey that's more of like an informational survey, or you just want to display read-only, you can have a survey that doesn't have a submit button. So it's just sort of you can kind of use it as your own little info web page. And then finally, you can rename the submit button. So if instead of having it say submit, if you have like 3 or 4 surveys in a row, you could change the submit button for each of those first 3 to say like next survey, and then finally the last one is submit. That way you kind of walk your users through the survey chain and they know that there's another survey coming up as opposed to just saying submit. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate each one of these for you with this project that I've created called Survey UI Tweaks. And what I've done is just built this survey project using one of the templates in REDCap that's available to anybody. I believe it's called multiple surveys. And what it does is it just creates a survey project for you with these 4 surveys in it automatically. And then you just have to finish setting them up. So I'm going to go to the external modules here, and you'll see that this Survey UI Tweaks external module is currently enabled. Now with external modules, users can't enable them on their own. They would have to have us do it. So you would have to email Terry or me at redcap@email.arizona.edu and let us know which project you want. You can tell us which project ID, which is up here, or just the project name here, and which external modules you would like us to create, and then we can enable for you, and we would enable those for you. So when I click configure, these are all of the options that we just talked about, and they're pretty simple to use because all you're doing is turning them on or off. So let me show you the survey as it stands right now. So this is the first survey, and you can see here that this is the space I was talking about at the beginning. So when we have numbered questions, and if we don't number the questions, and we want to shift this date of birth label to the left, then what we would do is, let me go to the external modules again. So I will go to configure, and then I'm going to check the box for this one. So I want to remove all the questions to the left. And then I hit save. And now one thing that you have to know about this is that it only works for surveys where the numbering is set to custom. So if we scroll down here to survey customizations, we have the question numbering. We have the question numbering set to auto. And so I'm going to change that to custom numbered and go back up here and save this. So now when we go back to the survey and I refresh it, now these labels have been moved over to the left. And it only works for the custom numbering. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back to the external module. And then I'm going to enable the auto scroll. And I think these are long enough. Let me check. I haven't actually run through all these, but we'll just submit this one. And you can see here that now there's an auto scroll on option, and you can click it off if you want. So let me just submit this first one here. They might not be long enough. Let me make my screen smaller, and then that'll help. So if I select one of these, it automatically scrolls up to the next field. And anytime I have a drop down, it'll scroll up to the next field. And then you can turn it off if you want. The next thing is to hide the queue button, the survey queue, and the survey queue is not enabled by default. So when you go to the designer for your surveys, you'll see it up here, this button at the top left, it says survey queue. You would turn that on, and this allows you to display sort of a checklist, a to-do list for your users. That way they can see which surveys need to be filled out. But it's not on by default. I turned it on for this demonstration. And you can see here in our survey, the survey queue is up here in the upper right corner. So if we wanted to hide that, we would just go back to the configure option and then select, we would check the checkbox for this one. And we'll save that. And when I refresh this, now that's gone. And the other thing is the survey queue at the end. So when I submit this survey, and then we'll just submit this final survey, this is the survey list at the end that I'm talking about. So if we don't want to see this for the users, we would just go back to the survey UI tweaks and check this one. Hide the queue list at the end of the survey for all surveys. And we'll save that. And then I believe I can just refresh this. Let me close this and open up a fresh survey. Interesting. I'll have to look into that because last night it was working when I tested it to hide the survey queue, and for some reason now it looks like it's not hiding it. Let me try that again.
maybe it's like a cached copy or something that's showing or whatever.
Could be. Let me. No, I'll have to look into that. We'll move on to the next one anyway. So the next thing is if I want to hide the font resize option. So let me go back to my survey. This font resize option up here in the upper corner. So if you don't want to see that, you can just check the box here to hide the font resize option for all the surveys. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll hit save, and then I'll refresh my survey, and now it's not showing up. And that would have helped us, Terry, on the other day when we were trying to get rid of that in the header for that cats thing. And then finally, you can hide the reset button for all radio buttons and true-false fields. So if we say, actually, let me show you that before I save it. That way you can see it. This reset link over here in the corner for all, I think it's also for drop downs maybe? Nope, just for radio buttons. So if you want to hide that reset link, you would just select that, and let me refresh, and you'll see that the reset links are gone. It might save you some space, it might look better, but it also doesn't allow you to uncheck something now in the radio box, radio buttons. So if I accidentally selected one of these and I didn't mean to, well, now I don't have an option to reset it. So you might want to think about that before you enable that.
Right. So that would be, I think that would be scary. On the other hand, what it does do is also make sure once somebody's clicked on it that they can't leave it blank. I can't really think of good reasons to do that. I've been thinking about it, but the only thing I can think of is once somebody has, made a choice, now they have to make some kind of choice here. So, but again, I think I'm really reaching as far as, I think maybe an engineer had a little bit of extra time and came up with that. I don't really see a good value to that.
For the REDCap project that I worked on, it actually came in handy because since I was mimicking the matrix fields and I had to get rid of all the little reset links for all of those, I had to use the CSS injector to find that where that link was and then change the display to none. If I had been able to do it with this tool, it would have been a little easier. But like Terry said, it doesn't really seem to have a lot of applications. You might be able to get away with it if you provide an option in your radio buttons to account for that, like this one here, the unknown not reported or something. But yeah, it's just something you can do. So the next section these are for all survey specific tweaks. So you would select which survey you want to apply this to. So we'll just do the first one. And then if you want to add another survey, you would just hit the plus sign up here, and it would give you another option to make these changes. And if you select any of these, so let me hit cancel and go back. If we just unselect all of these, because this group up top applies to all surveys. So when you do that, it doesn't give you the options down here, which is kind of nice because now you're not having to select them again. So if we wanted to have all these apply to everything, then the only two options we would have left down here at the bottom for survey specific tweaks would be, so let me select this, would be to rename the submit button or to hide the submit button. So I'm going to rename the submit button to next And then I'm going to add another one for the second survey, and I'm going to rename that to next. And then the third survey. And the fourth survey, just to show you how this is demonstrated, I'm going to select to hide the submit button. So we're not going to be able to submit it, but this way you can see both of them at once. So when we go back to the survey, now you can see that the submit button is labeled as next. And then when I submit this one, it's next, next. And then finally, the submit button's gone. So if you have a form that you just want to give some information out, this allows you to do that without having a submit button. One thing you have to keep in mind when you change the name of the submit button is that it doesn't resize the button. So if I said continue, so if you get a little wordy with your instructions and we go back to the survey, now your button text runs over. So you want to keep in mind, you want to kind of keep it pretty succinct and not get too wordy. I'm sure there is something you can do in the CSS injector to maybe increase the size of this button, but that would be a little more advanced. It's probably just easier to not be as wordy. So those are all of the options for the survey UI tweaks. Does anybody have any questions or would like to see anything again?
I have a question about, like, you made that last survey, you took the submit button off of it. So hypothetically, if that existed, does that mean does anything show up in the record status dashboard? Does it show up as incomplete? I mean, I'm guessing that the pages that were entered actually were submitted, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like it was.
So they're submitted. Once they've hit next, that automatically submits them so that you have that data. So that's good. But the last page, if it was text, there would be, the only way they would have to get out of it would be to close the browser or close the page, right?
Right. And that's why you'd only want to use that if it's like a single survey that you're just kind of passing along information and not storing anything. This wouldn't be the ideal setup for that.
Yeah, that's another one that I don't quite get. But anyway, I like the other things, especially gives a little bit more cohesiveness when you're doing the continue on to the next survey, rather than the submit. You know, it may catch you by surprise that there's another one after that. Whereas if you're saying next, I mean, it acts just like it does if it was a longer survey and you were using, it bypasses that whole problem having to use headers to break up a survey. You could just create multiple instruments, put them as surveys, and put the next on there, and it plays just like it would with headers. Anyway, that's kind of cool. Anybody have any questions about anything that we've talked about today? All right. Well, then I guess that we'll go ahead and stop a little early. That's all we have for you. Thank you all for logging in and joining us, and hope you got something out of it, and I hope we see you all back again next week.